Hello again and welcome to another 140k Imperial Guard Tactics video. Now before we get into today's video, I'd like to say a huge thank you to Bo Duran for sending in some awesome pictures of his 133rd London Lions. Absolutely love this colour scheme. The black base with the white and red arrows looks really cool, and I just, as always, just love seeing a vulture on the battlefield ready to do a amazing strafing run against the foul chaos forces. Love these pictures, love the colour scheme. Thank you for sending these in, Bo. If anyone else has got any cool pictures they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. Now without further ado, let's get into today's video. So today, guys, what I want to do is essentially take a look at what is next for the Death Korps of Krieg. So some of you may be or may not be aware that there is some potentially very disturbing news doing the rounds on the internet at the moment, which is it's looking like Death Korps of Krieg could be going the way of the dodo. They could be getting, quite severely diminished, should we say. At the moment, there's no confirmation on this. The initial reaction, I did do a video to it. I did a video reacting to the new Imperial Armour book on the information that we've got, first impressions. In there I did touch on the Death Korps of Krieg a little bit. Long story short, guys, there's been a big purge of units available to the Guard from Forge World. Both generic Guard units, which is a shame for all Guard players. Also looks like the Death Korps of Krieg have been hit quite hard because they are an entirely Forge World army. And, obviously the Legions have gone as well, but we're not going to focus on that just yet. So Death Korps have taken a real hammering. In fact, I don't think it's possible to run them as a legal army based on what we've seen from the reveals. Now, this is all based on limited information at the moment. Okay. It could be that an article will be released by Games Workshop tomorrow. They did say later on in the week, so they'd have more information for us. So that could be tomorrow, Thursday or Friday. But the point is that we are operating on limited information. But based on what we've seen, it does pose some interesting questions. And it does allow us to potentially let our imaginations run wild a little bit, both in a good way and a bad way, and sort of speculate what could be next for the Death Korps of Krieg. So what I want to do with this video is to focus on the positives. We don't yet have the full information. I don't want to start going off on one, and saying the sky is falling until we have that. If it turns out that Death Korps of Krieg are getting fully squatted, then don't worry, guys. I will be on the front lines. I'll be at the front of the protest, throwing piss jugs at Games Workshop HQ. I will be angry, and you will, and I'm sure I'll do lots of videos about it. But we don't have that information yet, and Games Workshop has said that more information is coming. So let's withhold that for now. Instead, let's take a look at what this could mean for the Death Korps of Krieg. What's the most likely positive scenario that's going to come out? I think that the most likely positive change that's going to come out of this is that Death Korps are going to get rolled into the main Guard Codex. And what that would do for them is open up some both fluffy and tactical advantages to them. So, first off, let's look at the fluffy point of view. Death Korps have always been a World War I style army. And they've always been, attrition warfare, World War I, machine guns, bayonet charges, all that kind of stuff. But they've also, and I'm saying this as someone who's been very interested in them for a very long time and has recently got my hands on a Death Korps army. They've also had this weird almost juxtaposition where all their infantry is very elite and quite good. And I'm obviously saying elite by Guard standards. You're meant to be an army that's all about attrition warfare, but you pay 1 point per model for over more than regular guardsmen. So you're meant to be attrition mass waves, but you can get less guardsmen than regular guard. Okay, that's a bit of an unusual one. You don't have access to things like conscripts under the old system. Again, that's a bit of a unusual one. Anyone who knows their World War I history, even even a sort of a cursory knowledge, will know that the vast majority of soldiers that fought in World War One were conscripts. Conscription was introduced. It was already in place in most European nations, and in Britain it was introduced for the first time in a very long time. And so, yeah, so conscripts would be something that Death Corps would get access to. That's very fluffy for them in terms of being able to fulfill that World War One aesthetic. And it would help sort of when you're building your Death Corps army, you can be like, yes, waves and waves of conscripts. Great. Taking that a step forward, looking at the new Death Corps trait. Now, overall, the new Death Corps regiment trait is worse. There's no doubt about it. It is a holdover from the 8th edition. From 8th edition, though. At the beginning of 8th edition, Games Workshop was handing out morale immune things left, right, and centre. Look at the old conscript rule, okay, or commissar rule, I should say. That basically made you immune to morale, and they bit by bit, especially for Guard, they have removed those rules. So you still have some ways of mitigating it. In other factions, like, for example, Sisters of Battle have one that means you can only lose one guy for morale, but they're not a horde army, so it's a little different. And you can take a hell of a lot of them, but they're not a horde army, Sisters. I mean, you can do anything with any army, but let's just talk in generalizations rather than getting bogged down in the detail. So if you look at the new Death Corps trait, yes, it would have been better if they'd kept the old one. But if you take this whole, now you can take conscripts line of argument, and then you go, right, with those conscripts, now, even if the conscripts get absolutely shredded, they're still only going to be running they're still only going to be combat attritioning on a roll of a 1, not a roll of a 1 or 2. And with bigger units, that's really, really good. I don't have the math hammer in front of me now, but I know that when 9th edition was first announced, there was a lot of math hammering done around big units and the new morale system. And it was shown that it was actually better for bigger units, the new morale system. And that was even taking into account people running away on 1s and 2s. So now you'll have people that, taking that a step further, you'll have people that are running away, big squads of 30, when they get with your Death Corps, when you get below 15 men with the blobs of conscripts, you'll still only be running away on 1s, which means after your combat attrition, you'll probably only lose 2 to 3 more conscripts afterwards. That's pretty good. That's really good. I mean, you lose 15, one guy runs away on the leadership, you roll your dice, and you've got 14 guys left, and still only 2 more run away. That's much better than what you would have had under 8th edition as a normal Guard player. Yes, for Death Corps it's not as good because the old system they would have just not run at all. But like I sort of said, that was a relic, and it was kind of. I understand why Games Workshop changed it. They've tried to have it where people aren't immune to morale. They've tried to do that in several places. So yes, your trait is slightly, is significantly worse for your infantry. But when you're playing into this World War One waves of infantry conscripts aesthetic, it's not as bad as it first looks. So you're trading off a little bit of pure morale immunity to still be pretty strong with the morale phase, but getting access to more narrative units. Pretty good. Right, let's move on so I don't end up repeating myself any more than I already have done. So we're looking at both narrative there and a tactical improvement. Now, another one that you could take a look at is the Mars Alpha pattern Lehman Russ. Now that is that was essentially a base, a normal Lehman Russ that did have a special rule where if it gets hit by a strength 4 or less weapon, it has +1 to its save. Now that is a shame that that's going, and you are just going to have the normal Lehman Russ now, but that rule, when I've used it several times, rarely came up, to be honest. And that's not a reflection of the tank itself, that's a reflection of the game around the tank. There really isn't as much strength 4 shooting out there. There isn't really that much. I mean, there is intercessors, and they do shoot strength 4 weapons, and they are mass 1. Don't get me wrong, but even at the height of intercessors' power, and they have been reduced somewhat recently, that rule rarely kicked in. Most people, if they were turning up with intercessor, would turn up with this is back in 8th edition. Would turn up with 6 squads of 5. It's not too many. Most of the points were actually going into more hard-hitting firepower. You still have that a lot with the new Primaris. You're typically seeing a lot of weapons of strength 5 and greater. So yes, it is a shame losing that rule, but it didn't come up as often as it would have liked. It was one of the things that, like, when it popped up, you were like, "Ooh, that's nice." The trade-off is that you're getting access to the regular Leman Russ, which is cheaper, frankly. It is cheaper. So you're no longer paying for a nice-to-have. In terms of points, you're no longer paying for a nice-to-have upgrade. You're paying for something that you have something that you don't really want. You're now paying for something that you don't have to necessarily pay for tacked on extras. It's one of the big problems with some factions where things are overcosted because they've got special rules baked into the profile, but the special rules don't turn up very often. I know that used to be a big problem with, like, the Necron death marks. They were quite expensive and they had this rule, but it rarely was used, basically. Correct me if I'm wrong there. So that's basically it, guys. There's a few other things that we could go through. I'm not going to list them all one by one here. Again, this is very much an emerging picture. But what I'm trying to get across here, guys, is that the Death Corps are changing. And us Guard players, we don't change too quickly. I've been banging on about the same pure infantry tactics for years and years now. Hey, they still work. I make them work, maybe, but no one likes change initially. When people see things initially, they go ugh. Especially when at first glance those changes are very negative. Losing whole factions is bad. It really, really is. That's a video for another time, guys. I don't want to do salty video after salty video, so I'm gonna, I could have done a video today, which was, I was gonna focus on what it, what it actually means when Games Workshop squats a faction. What are you saying to the community? But we won't do that video today. We've got to, for every salty-ish video to full salt mine video, we've got to balance it out with a positive video. Otherwise, we just become a salt flat, basically. What I would say though is this, and I hope that you Death Corps players have, who are watching this have heard this, hear this bit. Maybe I should have said it at the beginning of the video, which is, yes, things are changing, and yes, there could be some logical. Sometimes I hate that word. There could be some very logical benefits for why being rolled into the Guard Codex is a good thing for the Death Corps. But that doesn't necessarily, logic's not everything. Adeptus Mechanicus players suddenly, burn the place down. But logic's not everything, and sometimes how you feel about something is extremely important. And if you are a Death Corps player, and you've had access to this cool, unique thing of having this slightly better weapon skill guard, and this World War I aesthetic, and this sense of uniqueness and coolness, and then that being taken away is really horrible. It's not bad. Bad's not a strong enough word. It's horrible. And this is what I want to do a video touching on this, which is you can give all the logical arguments that you want, but at the end of the day, when someone in one form or another takes away that army that you love, and they change fundamentally how the army plays, and you have to sort of try and struggle to recapture that magic, it's horrible. It's not nice. It doesn't matter. And someone can dangle in front of you all the tactical benefits in the world, but Death Korps of Krieg were never one of those armies that were like overly tactical, win at all costs, tournament competitive. right down to their fluff, they were never like that. They played in a World War I style, and so it doesn't. And so the thing that I hope Games Workshop doesn't squat Deathcore, and I hope that this is, you know, they've created all this controversy and the whole sort of no news is bad news kind of kind of thing. You know, any news, any publicity is good publicity, all that kind of stuff. And that hopefully they're going to go, hey, you thought you were getting shit on, but actually, look at all this amazing stuff we're going to give you. You're in the Guard Codex, your units are available there, blah, 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 blah. Maybe that we haven't seen the full page of contents yet, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's what they'll reveal. But if they don't, then what you've got to understand is Deathcore of Krieg were not one of those armies that, they're not like Space Marines where people math hammer every last little thing about it. They're not the logical choice. You have to think of the kind of player that collects a Deathcore of Krieg army. Okay? And they're buying it from Forge World. That kind of person has seen all the more cost-effective, the more logical, the more tactical armies and units and options out there. They've seen all that stuff and they've gone, no, none of that matters. None of that tangible stuff matters to me. I want this army because they are amazing and they are cool and I want that. That is what I love. Not what I think is best. That is what I love. And that kind of player will not just look at armies like Deathcore of Krieg, but they will pick up other armies as well. And that kind of player is someone who, when they commit to your product, you'll have them for life. If you offer that kind of person that thing that they love, you'll have them for life. And Deathcore of Krieg players out there, they're not common. They're not uncommon, but they're not everywhere. But you always know a Deathcore Krieg player. When you see the army, if you're playing at a tournament, you always know you're going to have a great game because that person has collected that army, has turned up to this event to use the army. Doesn't matter about winning, but he's going to be an absolute hoot to play against because he is an amazing, passionate hobbyist. Now, whether that is for Deathcore or another army somewhere else, and we'll get into this in another video. Where's the Deathcore for another army, like what Sisters used to be back in the day, and Bretonians back in Fantasy, that kind of person, they are that kind of hobbyist is very common, very very common. I would say that kind of hobbyist makes up 50% of the kind of players that in 40k, the people that collect all these obscure armies and these passion projects, but they're spread out across 20, 30 different factions. But that kind of player makes up at least 50% of all the players that partake in Warhammer. But they are spread out. But what you do when you remove a faction like Deathcore of Krieg, like Renegades and Heretics, like Elysians, like Bretonians, like Tomb Kings, what you do is you send a signal to 50% of your player base saying, don't collect those obscure things, don't collect those fringe things, because if you do, you are making a risky investment. You are collecting something that has a greater than not possibility of disappearing, of having no rules, of you not being able to use it. And that's not a signal you want to give to this kind of player. Anyway, guys, we'll get into that in more detail down in the next video. I just wanted to throw that out there now. Let me know what you think about that. Let me know what you think about the tactical implications of the Krieg. We've got that lovely bit of, I'm trying to do these videos, a bit tactical, a bit touchy-feely at the same time. Let me know what you think. Put it all down in the comment section below. If you are a Deathcore Krieg player, now that the initial shock horror is over, what do you think about the options that you would have available to you in the Guard Codex? Or, like I pointed out in the last 5 minutes of the video, do you just not care about that shit? You just wish that they hadn't messed with your Deathcore, sorry. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Thank you guys for listening, and of course, I'll see you guys next time.